Chapter 6. When Detective Mallory McLeod strolled into the alley next to the Maze Club, surrounded by a crowd of men and women, some from her precinct and some from the crime lab. The others college students watched curiously behind the yellow tape. The students piled out of the bar because they heard there was a dead body, and inquisitive, they wondered what one would look like. The tenants in the buildings surrounding the alley peered down from their windows facing the garbage bin, wondering what the commotion was all about. It wasn't uncommon to find a homeless person lying around dead after the winter thaw. "Did you supervise the taking of the pictures?" she asked as Detective Bell handed her a cup of coffee, and she pulled a loose cigarette from his pocket. "I thought you were off those things and on the gum," Bell said. "Didn't do anything for me but make me cranky, and then I had to drink more to feel alive." She looked down at the corpse and put on gloves handed to her by Bell. "This one looks different. I've never seen one quite as shriveled up as him. I assume it's a male." She crouched down to get a better look. "Looks like all the blood was drained from his body." She stood up from her crouching position. "There are teeth marks on the skin. Not the kind where you have a killer who's fond of biting," Bell said, staring at the cadaver, and then his gaze fixed on Mallory. "We have 2 psychotic killers running amok in Manhattan, and they say crime is down. Tell that to whoever he is," Mallory said, pointing at the bag of bones with dry skin covering it. "Who called it in?" Bell turned and pointed to a short bald guy standing shivering in the cold with a blanket wrapped around him, as if he had been drenched by the rain, but it wasn't raining. It was just cold as hell outside, and Mallory couldn't wait to get back to her car, and to her warm apartment and her cat. At least her cat cared about her. Well, as long as she placed water and a bowl of food when he came in from his nightly hunt for rats. He didn't eat them, he just needed to keep his predatory instincts sharp. He never could depend on the food that Mallory provided for him. Lately, she spent days out in the field and came back hungry and not eating herself, only taking time to fall into bed without a shower. Mallory sauntered over to the man. "What's your name?" He glanced at her. Mallory could tell by the look in his eyes that he didn't like answering questions, and he didn't like women particular. She didn't want to waste her time with him. "Since you don't think you need to answer my questions, Detective Bell will ask you and read you your rights." "Am I being arrested?" His voice harsh and annoyed. "No. But I like to get all the formalities over, just in case you're a suspect, and we have to arrest you later." His voice broke, and he acted nervously. Mallory could see the shiver of his body from under the blanket, and his hands trembling, but not from the cold. He knew something. "I'll talk to him," the man said, pointing to Bell. His voice more appealing and agreeable. Mallory wasn't convinced of his sincerity at giving out information. She thought it was more of a tactic to stall. "You do that, and I want to see you tomorrow morning at 9 in the precinct." "I thought if I talked to your partner I didn't have to speak to you," he said, one eye twitching. "Well, you thought wrong." And she walked away. "I'll talk now." "I don't want to go to that place," the man said loud at her back as she headed for her car. "That's tough shit. I'm going home. Tomorrow be there at 9. And she left him, begging Bell to not take him downtown. "I'll see you tomorrow," Mallory said, and waved at Bell and mumbled, "I have a cat to feed and I need some rest. If I don't make it in tomorrow, check on 5th Avenue at the apartment of Jovani Nightingale. I have a strange feeling about him," she said, walking past Bell, her sights on her Ford. "You'll be in," Bell said, shooting her a wave. The only feeling Mallory had about Jovani was a feeling of lust, and the need to be with a man she thought she could fuck now or in the future. After all, where could she find a man as fine-looking as him? She checked her history, and to her knowledge she had never come close to one such as him. When Hannah was walking out the back door of Jovani's apartment, Mallory McLeod walked up to the elevator and stepped inside, and as she traveled up in an open glass and chrome elevator, she looked out over the Manhattan skyline. This wasn't the elevator she had taken before. It must be nice to have so many options in life, she thought. In the time the glass elevator took her up and she reached the penthouse, she thought of what it would be like to be with a man like him. Handsome, beautiful, and rich. She had never wanted those things. She had many offers, but they became few and far in between because now all she knew was her work. She didn't have much time for anything else, not even a cat. All the men she met lately were in her precinct, and they were all married, and if they weren't working there, they were either dead or killers. But this man was something different. She didn't know what. She just knew it was something unusual about him. She felt a rush of adrenaline course through her as she neared his floor. She felt her heart beat quickly, which had never happened until now. She felt a need to be near him. The elevator opened at the very top, and she stepped off, and there he stood with a white robe, and on the pocket, his initials in black and gold. She stood in the doorway and looked around, and the room had a pool the size of an Olympic pool. There were 3 chandeliers overhead, and benches and chairs and tables in positioned areas. "Do you swim, Detective Mallory?" He met her at the entrance and extended his hand to show her where to sit. She followed and sat in a cushioned chair near a table. "Not lately. I haven't had the time." Her eyes followed him. From his hair to his face and his unusual blue eyes. Although her eyes were blue, she had yet to see a color like his. They were more purple than blue, but then they kept changing in front of her. She shook her head and blinked to check her vision. Normally she would wear her glasses, but around him, unchecked vanity crept into her. Never had she cared how a man perceived her. She was who she was, but around Jovani, she morphed into a different woman. The kind of woman her mother had wanted her to become, a soft, easy woman accepting that she was the weaker of the species, and to get a man she had to use her femininity to convince them that she was worthy of their attention. She never wanted to be that kind of woman. Being that kind of woman had its advantages and disadvantages. Mallory only saw a disadvantage until now, as she sat near Jovani. "Then you should make time to swim. It will relax you," he said, and handed her a glass. She took it and placed it on the table. "I hope you aren't on duty." "No. But I can't drink. I'm driving." "Just one drink," he said, smiling at her with his beautiful mouth of even teeth. "I have 100-year-old wine, and it's not fun drinking alone." He poured some into her glass until Mallory waved her hand to stop him. He placed the bottle down after pouring himself a drink, but never touching it. Then Jovani sat near her and gazed at her and smiled. She felt nervous. In her case, she never felt nervous near a man. Only the ones she thought attractive enough for her to waste time with them. "Did you find the man or woman who killed those people we heard about?" The news people portray the killer as some homicidal maniac. "I'm afraid we haven't found them yet. It appears it's more than one." Jovani raised an eyebrow. "Is that why you're here?" "Not really. I came to check if you had heard anything. You're close to people that have barred me from talking to anyone in their circle of rich, influential friends. They have lawyers and, well, we don't have the resources to fight them in court, even if we suspect that they could be killing others. You're the only one in that group who will talk to me. And you think someone I know is protecting their own. What we know is some of the killings occurred in a small radius, and the center is in Billionaires Row, here or roundabout 5th Avenue. That's interesting. Do you have suspects?" "If I eliminated you, no," Mallory said, smiling. Jovani felt a rush of desperation creep through him. His mind wandered, and he thought about what he would do if she pinpointed him as the killer. She had focused on him for some reason, but he didn't know what, until she made a remark. And then he knew. "The only thing I suspect you of doing is having women falling in love with you, and they die of a broken heart." She stared at him. A long, penetrating gaze. It was a look that held a double meaning. She was aroused by him. He heard her heart beat rapidly. He saw her eyes' pupils dilate. Not from fear, but from being stirred by passion. Mallory, blinded by her attraction to Jovani and a need to calm herself before she gave away her intentions, took a sip of the wine. This wine is indeed the best I've tasted in my life. It would be the best because she wasn't a wine drinker. She drank scotch without water. Jovani didn't know how to take that. He didn't want her coming on to him. She was a detective after all, and one day she may put it together. He didn't need the distraction of her falling in love with him. He didn't have time for the jealousy and anger of a mortal. He knew that would come if she liked him too much. Besides, he had to worry about Sasha discovering his love for Hannah. He knew if Mallory hung around him too much, she would find out about Sasha, and Sasha would discover her, and there would be no containing Sasha's rage toward him and the woman he loved. And there was Justin to contend with, and he didn't need the added hassle of this detective. "Are you married, Detective McCloud?" "Call me Mallory." "No, I'm not." She smiled a warm, silly smile. "I'm afraid I have a fiancé," Jovani said. Mallory rose quickly, and her lips twitched from embarrassment. "I have to be going." The wine was great. When she stood, she swayed and Jovani caught her. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. I haven't had much sleep." "Do you want me to have my driver take you home?" "I'll have him follow you home." "No. I can drive. It's just over the bridge in New Jersey. If I think I can't drive, I'll pull over and wait." And Mallory strode to the elevator, not the one she came in on. She stepped in and waved to Jovani. The door closed and it took her to the first floor where outside her car angled against the curb. She got in and headed home to her apartment, and a cat who needed her and would be there waiting patiently for her return.